What's going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here with Mike Kaye for the post-game edition of the No Huddle Show. The Eagles just lost the New England Patriots 17-10, right? That was the final
that
score?
That was the score, Zachary.
It's a lame final score. It was a defensive struggle, or I guess the defenses didn't struggle. The offenses struggled. But, there's like a strange game to analyze just because there's a lot of positive you can take away with it from the Eagles' perspective. A lot of negative, but it's kind of all the same story for the Eagles. This offense, just all the problems they've had all season and last season, but especially this season, the passing game just isn't there. Not having Jordan Howard was clearly an issue, and they lost this game because the offense scored 10 points early. They scored their 10th point early in the second quarter, didn't score the rest of the game, and now they sit here at 5-5. The Cowboys won. They're 6-4. The division is still within reach. But I personally don't see a scenario where this offense figures it out because they've given us no reason to believe that they can. But what when you walk away from this game, what was your first thought?
I think the defense is kind of in a positive way. Look, you and I came into this game thinking they didn't have much of a shot. They had a shot with a minute left in this game.
If the offense had any level of production today, they would have won.
Correct.
Yeah.
Jim Schwartz called a top 3 game in his history as an Eagles defensive coordinator in this game. He was fantastic. They were prepared. The only time that they let up is they were confused on a trick play. Julian Edelman tossed a touchdown pass. Julian Edelman was more productive in the red zone than Tom Brady was. Okay? I think that's something that needs to be kind of considered. I think the defense had maybe 3 breakdowns in pass coverage. I thought Ronald Darby, outside of, the Edelman throw to the end zone.
Yeah, it looked like he kind of gave up on the play. I don't know if he thought it was a run or something.
I think he did. I think he was a little confused. I thought he played well. Jalen Mills played well. Nathan Gary had a brutal missed tackle, but outside of that, he played with his hair on fire. Had a sack on Tom Brady. Camus Grugier-Hill finally looks healthy again. The defensive line got consistent pressure. They weren't able to close for the most part, but they looked good. I thought Derek Barnett played a really good game. So did Brandon Graham. This is one of those things where it's typically you have one side of the ball letting the other down in a close game like this, and the offense clearly let the defense down. I mean, like you said, this is a tale as old as time, song as old as rhyme sort of thing with their offense. They shrink up in the middle of games. Even if they get off to a fast start, which we've noticed as of late. As of late, they've gotten off to great starts and then kind of slowly fallen into this rut. And you can't do that against really good teams. The Patriots offense didn't play that well, but they didn't play well because the defense was playing. The Eagles defense was well prepared for them and played well and delivered. But the Eagles offense seemingly stabbed themselves in the foot, or shot themselves in the foot.
Stabbing yourself in the foot, you have to intentionally do that, so that'd be more impressive.
Well,
once you're dropping the knife, I guess.
Yeah, I guess you're dropping the knife. I'm sure there's
you're in the kitchen and you're you just drop the knife on your foot.
There's a scene in Liar Liar.
It's important that we break this down.
Well, yeah, there's a scene in Liar Liar where Jim Carrey's assistant says her friend had her house broken into and the guy fell through a roof onto a knife and sued her, and that's basically talking about how terrible lawyers are. Anyway, that's a movie. We don't share that movie. We don't share that opinion. And the truth shall set you free, to quote that movie. This offense is not good. And look, you can say what you want about Jordan Howard not being here. You can say what you want about Alshon Jeffrey
not being here.
Yeah, Carson Wentz. We get inconsistent flack that we're not tough on Carson or we are too tough on Carson. This was a bad game for him. And you know what? To his credit, he was probably the most accountable I think he's ever been in a post-game press conference. He said he needed to get better. He was sacked several times, said that he needed to get rid of the ball faster. He had a sack fumble in this game, his first turnover at the link this season. Basically handed the Patriots 3 points. This is not an offense that can function against really good teams. And while I'm very encouraged by the defense heading into this matchup against Seattle, I just don't know if this Eagles offense can trade points with the Seattle offense.
Yeah. I think it's important to consider circumstance with Carson, but I looked up this stat, and I think it doesn't really say a lot of great things about it. The Eagles want him to be an elite quarterback. I think you and I both at this point don't think he has shown that he is that at this stage of his career. It looked like he was heading that way in 2017.
I think he has elite talent. I don't know if he can put it all together.
But so the Eagles have only scored 25 or more points, including the playoffs, dating back to last season. They've only scored 25 or more points 9 times. 5 of those games were against the Redskins, Giants, or Jets, and 2 of those games, other than those, were with Nick Foles at quarterback. So Carson Wentz has only led 2 legitimate 25-point games. You deserve credit for when you do it against a bad team, but not that much credit. So, I understand circumstances. Like, the receivers this year have just been awful. And I think there's too often, just the idea that he needs to make everybody better around him. That's too much on his shoulders. If the receivers are bad, they're bad. That's on the coaching staff and those players more than Carson. But at the same time, this offense just hasn't ever found its groove since he hurt his knee 2 years ago. And I think at this, so after the game, Doug Peterson and Carson Wentz were asked, why do you think, after all the evidence, we're 11 games or 10 games into the season, why do you think this offense can get better? And it's just, we believe in the guys, what I see in practice. It's all the same stuff. And they've given us no reason to believe they can get better. That's the crazy thing is if just one guy emerged outside of Zach Ertz as a legitimate threat, Dallas Goedert has been good, but I don't think teams fear Dallas Goedert right now. If they had one, even if they had Jordan Howard tonight, I think they win this game.
I agree.
I legitimately think, so it's just if they have one receiver who could do anything. Before that last drive where they got a couple of big plays, I think there was a 29-yard pass to Arcega-Whiteside, a 19-yard one to Nelson Agholor. Both were good throws, good catches. It kind of mixed in with 2 bad throws where he miscommunicated with Zach Ertz and missed him. But if you remove all of that, the numbers were
not pretty.
The receivers had 3 catches for 22 yards the entire game before that last drive. Jordan Matthews played just about every snap, it seemed like, when there was 3 receivers out there. Mac Hollins and J.J. Arcega-Whiteside rotated. Mac Hollins didn't have a catch again, and you guys will be shocked to find out. Although there was a play where he was open and Carson missed him, which people are joking maybe he was freaking out so much that Mac Hollins was open that he threw it over his head. But Alshon Jeffrey, in theory, Alshon Jeffrey's presence should help, but he's been really bad this season, and he doesn't scare defenses anymore. So I don't know where the fix is. They didn't get Josh Gordon. It seems like in retrospect they should have. Maybe they didn't want to take the risk of his off-field stuff, and I get that. But just the offseason of moves and the way they committed to Alshon Jeffrey and the way they committed to Nelson Agholor instead of, I know Golden Tate didn't work out last year, but he's working out in New York. I just have no reason to believe this offense is going to get better, and that's why I kind of still feel like I don't see this team winning the NFC East.
So I'll say this. I'll counterbalance this. The Cowboys won that game, but they've played really sloppy football since the bye.
Yeah, but a win's a win.
A win is a win. A win is a win is a win.
And their offense is pretty good.
Their defense is terrible.
It is. It's like the flip. It's like the flip side of the Eagles.
Right. That's why I think.
They're a team that can come back from being down, whereas the Eagles are not.
Correct.
That's the difference between the two.
But I think if this defense is playing at a high level, it's got a shot.
I mean, keep in mind the Cowboys obliterated the Eagles also.
Correct.
Yeah.
At home.
Yeah.
Circumstances weren't terrific either. I'm not making excuses for them. I'm not trying to be the bright side.
Play devil's advocate.
Yeah. I'm saying I think that.
But that's not to cut you off, but that's kind of the positive everybody seems to keep going to is that, well, the Cowboys aren't that good. Well, the Eagles aren't good. That's it's a big whatabout. I'm not saying you're doing that. That's a big whataboutism from the Eagles fan base, I feel like, in the media, because I know the schedule looks harder for the Cowboys than it does for the Eagles, but there's been no evidence that the Eagles are a better team than the Cowboys.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with that.
There's no evidence of that.
Yeah, I agree with that. What I will say is this. I do think there were positives to take away from this game. I thought Boston Scott played relatively well for a guy who had never gotten snaps. Miles Sanders, before they forgot he existed, played pretty well. I thought he ran the ball really
he did in the
effectively
beginning, and
in the first
towards
half.
the end, he wasn't running the ball as well anymore.
Right, but your back's against the wall. There's stuff going on. He was also getting inconsistent carries. I think they feel good about Jay Ajayi. I spoke to somebody in the locker room who didn't want to speak on the record, but the plan was to basically have him involved if there was an injury. Yeah. He was not supposed to play in this game. He was not part of the game plan. He was there for...
I would hope so.
Right. He was part of the emergent... we criticized that, too.
I know. Well, that's the thing. They were playing with fire there. And Miles went out for a little bit, and they're lucky it wasn't more serious, because as much as you say Boston Scott played well, if he's your number one running back here...
Yeah, for sure. I'll say the biggest thing is Lane Johnson.
Yes.
Lane Johnson went out in the beginning of the second
quarter.
They didn't score again. Right. Lane Johnson... If he's not the top right tackle in the NFL, he is top 3. And Carson just seemed to be a little more skittish in there. I'm not saying that's the reason.
He was holding on to the ball a little too long too. Yeah.
Yeah, and he admitted that. They were just getting Jason Peters back, and then Jason Peters went down in this game, and Big V had to come off the bench cold, and so did Andre Dillard. Look, towards the end, this was a perfect storm of terribleness. That said, we've seen this too much from the offense to know, this isn't an exception to the rule. This is the offense. They have an issue with an injury every game. They're not very consistent. Look, they could surprise us against Seattle. I'll tell you this. The defense surprised me today. I thought Tom Brady was going to run up and down this field.
I think we overestimated the Patriots' weapons on offense, too.
You certainly did.
Yeah, I know.
But I think...
Well, that's the thing. If the Patriots had any level of weapons, it might have been a little bit different.
Well, and I think, too, you take the fumble away...
Carson's fumble?
Yeah, Carson was relatively smart with the ball. This is a very opportunistic Patriots.
Yeah, I will say, Carson deserves credit for how he's done that this season. He's not really... So he fumbled the ball away, which was bad. It was a bad fumble. He let the ball go, but otherwise, his throws, he hasn't been making as many risky throws.
Right, and I think, look, there were some miscommunications. Yes. There were some new guys in there. I'm not making excuses for him, but I also think you have to. If you're going to criticize the bad, you also have to kind of take the context of how uneven his performance was. He wasn't horrible. He was not good.
For sure.
I'd say it was a mediocre performance. And then again, like you said, you can't, when you have injuries and you have the receivers that he does, you can't completely condemn him for...
They also keep trying to tell us that they believe in all these... Well, obviously they're not going to say anything different, but they keep saying, I see it in practice. Well, it doesn't mean anything if they don't do it on Sunday.
Yeah, practice doesn't really mean anything. Okay, let's get into the defense, because I think that's the true story of this game, if you want to take anything positive away from it. Genard Avery was a really smart trade, and I will tell you why. They get rid of Andrew Zendejo after trading for him.
Who had an interception today, by the way.
Just kind of the way this Eagles season goes. He's probably going to end up having a Lombardi trophy if Kirk Cousins keeps playing the way he is.
Ever since Zach Brown mouthed off.
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
Cousins, man.
Zach Brown probably watched this game from home.
Actually, well, we have to talk about a topic regarding Zach Brown at the end of the podcast.
We shall.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's more about his band than him. But anyway, so the defense. Here's the thing. So Genard Avery gives them this option with that 11th defensive player that used to be Andrew Zendejo almost every other snap. They can either go into dime looks, which has been Rasul Douglas and Ronald Darby on the outside, Jalen Mills and Avonte Maddox inside on dime. Dime is they've got 6 defensive backs on the field, so 2 safeties and then those 4 corners. They can also go into a unique base formation where you have the 2 coverage linebackers in Kamu Grugier-Hill and Nathan Gary, and then you have Genard Avery who can stand up and be a designated blitzer. He also rushed as a stand-up defensive end in this game too. They moved him around. He had
a tip pass and a couple pressures too.
Yeah, they moved him around very, very well. I think he's kind of like the new wild card that Andy Reid used to call him fastballs that you could throw at the opposing quarterback. I thought he did a really good job.
He's a fun player that I think fans are going to really learn to love here.
Really does not like talking to the media. He was the first guy out of the locker room today.
I don't know if he doesn't like it. He just kind of just didn't. I don't know if he.
Well, no, but
I feel like he might think nobody wants to talk to him.
Well, he hasn't been around very much.
Yeah.
Anyway,
you're right. Yeah.
I'm not calling him out. I'm just saying.
Sounds like you are.
His first interview was terrific. And then I think when you look at, Malcolm Jenkins had another breakdown in zone coverage.
Had a lot of those this year.
I'm confused as to why this is happening. I mean, they have him play several roles, so I'm wondering if he confuses one setup.
There was never an issue before, though.
Yeah, I know. It's just a very weird thing. It doesn't look like he's losing a step. It looks like he just doesn't know where to be.
Yeah. Because there was I forget what the play was exactly, but he was like looking around. Oh no, it was like Ronald Darby. It was like him and Ronald Darby were like yelling at each other. It looked like. I think that's the play you're thinking of.
Yeah, the big gain down the mid. I think it was to Ben Watson.
Yeah, Ben Watson. That's what. Yeah, which Ben Watson shouldn't be getting a big gain against that.
Ben Watson's like old
enough
to be our
targeting. They were like targeting him down the field. It was weird.
Yeah, well, Jalen Mills finally found a guy he can run with all the way down the field.
I saw that joke being made a few times on Twitter.
Yeah. Look, I think there was a lot of positives. I think Fletcher Cox looks like Fletcher Cox. He's trending in the right direction. I think Brandon Graham and Derek Barnett played pretty well. I didn't really notice Timmy Jernigan all that much, but he was rotating. Anthony Rush is getting a lot of playing time, which is interesting because, they have him under contract for a bit because he was a rookie and they signed him off a practice squad. And then, I thought the corners have played really well since Darby and Mills have been back. Yeah, Mills had a couple of really big plays in this. He had a run stop that was fantastic, and then a couple of plays later, he had that big pass breakup.
He had the one pass breakup that kind of just hit him. If he had seen the ball coming, he would intercept it. That was tipped by Avery, actually. Yeah,
that's not the one I'm talking about. The one he had downfield. But
I'm just saying that one. And he celebrated as if he was the reason why it was a pass breakup, and the ball just kind of hit him in the arm. But that's classic Mills.
I mean, look again. This is a game that we thought they had no shot in, or at least a really large outside chance of not winning, I guess
that was a weird way.
Yeah, sorry. They had a very outside shot of winning this game, and look, it was a 7-point game.
Yeah, they were close until the end.
Against
a chance to tie it
against a team that will almost definitely be in the AFC Championship game, probably. So if you can be competitive in playoff-like atmospheres, I guess you could say that's important. Seattle's going to be important. If they lose to Seattle, it will mean something, but if New England takes care of business against Dallas, it's still an even playing field. So even if they are one game back after next week, because the similar schedule things, remember, they still have to go to Chicago. They still have to play the Bills in Dallas. Those won't be easy outs. I mean, they can win those games, but...
I mean, if the Cowboys beat the Patriots, though, then it'll be interesting.
Yeah, then it's...
I mean, the thing is, the NFC is so weird right now that the Eagles could still be in the race for the NFC wild card. So the Vikings came back and won today. They were losing by a decent amount to the Broncos. But the Falcons beat the Panthers. I think the Panthers are right in there. I don't know if they were in the wild card.
Not anymore, I don't think.
I mean, it's going to be harder. The Eagles can't afford to lose many more games is the general gist.
Yeah, I mean, if they win out...
if they lose to the Seahawks, like you said, then they have to pretty much win out after that.
Yeah, and then they...
So that's why next week is it would be ideal to get a win next week.
Yeah, you want to give yourself some space with a win in one of these two games. They nearly pulled this one off, even though the offense didn't show up for an entire half. And I mean, look, when you have such low expectations, I don't know how you could show up to this game realistically without Jordan Howard, without Alshon Jeffrey, and think you're going to win this game. So as a fan, I think you should... I'm not going to tell fans how they should feel, but I would imagine most fans are taking the defense's performance as a positive.
I don't know if many people are focusing on positives. Right
well,
now.
The thing that people aren't taking as a positive is Nelson Agholor, who...
Yes, I was about to bring him up. So it seems like this happens once every other week where Agholor has a play where he doesn't track it very well. In the moment, it doesn't look as bad. And then you see the slowed down replay, and it looks very bad. Mm-hmm. So he had a play on that last drive. Carson Wentz, he kind of placed it pretty well. It wasn't perfect. There was wind.
That was as good of a play.
As good as you can.
I mean, he had pressure all up in his face.
And the way, Agholor was, contorting... You have to look at... Just search Nelson Agholor on Twitter. It'll come up. The way he was, contorting his body, he, made it so... So tell him what he said to you or when you were...
I'm pulling it up, so keep talking.
But, yeah, so he basically, had a chance to catch it, and I think his, leg hit the ground, and it, messed him up. But it's because he was, he just does not know how to position his body on those long balls. He gets down there, clearly has the speed, but the dude just cannot do it. And it's just he can't get a win. He can't get an individual win to save his life. I don't remember the last win he's had.
You know what's interesting is he was the reason why they were in scoring position. Remember, he ran that dagger route.
He had that 19-yard catch.
Across the middle of the field. And he said that he felt like they were in great position. So here are a couple of quotes from him. He was asked if he thought he tracked the ball well. He said yes. If anything, I kind of hit the ground, and that's when I kind of lost it.
He did not track the ball well.
If you watched the play, he contorted his body when he didn't need to. As the ball's hitting his hands, his knees hit the ground, and it's almost like he went into shock in his, you know what I mean? Like,
and he acted like he just tore his ACL when it happened. By the way,
well, he did hit his knees pretty hard. I'm not giving him excuses, but if you watch the replay, it looks like he hits his knees pretty hard. And actually, live, it looked like he bent backwards. That's why I was like, oh man, he might have torn his ACL. So here's something interesting. It was windy today. It's still windy. We can see it on the field. It was about 13 miles per hour out there from the northeast. The ball did travel weird, but at the end of the day, it's the NFL, and you've got to find a way to track it down, Agholor said. I thought I followed it, and on the way down, I kind of hit the ground pretty hard and moved it. That's what it looks like on like the replay. That said, he didn't need to contort his body to make that catch.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
He had also said, he took accountability. He took accountability
as much
for
accountability as Nelson Agholor takes.
That's the reality of this league. It's good on good every week. You've got to make sure you focus in and handle yours. The defense played amazing. They played very well.
That's
I wish we could have fit
responsibility.
Yeah. This quote stood out to me pretty hard. This is hard because I wanted us to win that one. As opposed to what? Another game that you wanted to lose?
That you didn't want them to win?
Yeah, I was very confused by that one. Anyway, you can read that online at NJ.com /Eagles.
I get that.
Killing my plug, bro.
I get that he's not going to come out and say, I'm just not doing a good enough job tracking the ball. But, you also can't say, I think I did a great job tracking the ball when there's been multiple, the Cowboys one in particular is the one he defended himself so profusely. Because that was the one where everybody kind of blew up on the fact that this dude just
Well, yeah, because he had the issues against the Falcons and the Lions as well.
And also so he has the speed, and we've seen that he can make plays in the past. I don't know what's different this year for him. I don't know if he's lost confidence. He's getting jammed at the line, and then he doesn't get open. It's just all these simple things that if you were a good enough receiver to lead this team, then he would have been making plays. He just seems to have lost a step, or lost confidence, or we've talked about we need to change the scenery, but it's just not getting better. It's just not.
No, I mean he's regressing. It's a clear regression, and it started last year a little bit towards the end where he kind of became a non-factor. I think trading for Golden Tate really messed his confidence up. I mean, I'm not going to jump in the guy's head, but that's when this regression somewhat started to happen.
He started playing a little less, getting targeted a little less.
He was inconsistently part of the offense. But to be honest with you, everybody's performance is down.
Yeah. It's not just him.
Zach Ertz's performance is down. Zach Ertz is
He's
still
been really
playing
good the last
at a
3 weeks.
Very high level. Dallas Goedert's playing at a very high level. Alshon Jeffrey is averaging 10.4 yards per catch. He's averaging 20
career worst.
20 less yards per game than he did last year. That's an incredible drop off for a number one wide receiver.
He's on pace to lead the team with a little over 600 yards. Wide receiver wise.
Yeah, because I was going to say Zach
Ertz, at wide receiver, which would actually now. So before he was on pace for 650 or something like that. Then he missed this game. So before that, he was on pace to have the least since Todd Pinkston in 2003, and now this will be less. That he's on pace to have less than Todd Pinkston.
I mean, guys aren't helping Carson Wentz out.
Sure.
We've got to be critical on Carson, but the reality of the situation is that this is
players
not
stink.
I mean, he's got Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert that he can depend on.
And tight ends can only do so much unless they're freaks of nature, which those two aren't.
Right. Well,
I mean, they're relative to other tight ends, but they're not deep threats.
Yeah, it's not like they have Vernon Davis in his prime. This is beginning to turn into a situation where I don't know what the front office wants to do, or if they have enough faith in this team that they can go on a large run. Because at this point, I know you say to yourself, Robbie Anderson's probably not worth a third-round pick because he's on a contract year. If you think your team's good enough to win a Super Bowl, you've got to make a move. You've got to help your quarterback out. And you've invested in your quarterback to the point where the next few years are going to be harder to invest around him. So,
so they just extended Brandon Brooks. There's a report that they're trying to extend Zach Ertz, Malcolm Jenkins, and Lane Johnson. That's not going to reduce money.
Well, it will reduce next year's money.
But long term though,
yeah, it's kind of silly. not that they want to do that, but it's one of those things where they're
doing it prematurely. Yeah.
Look, they have a
Brandon Brooks, absolutely.
Brandon Brooks is the best player on this team. It's not even. I don't even know if it's.
And he's earned the money.
I'm not even sure if it's close to
anybody.
There's no one who's playing on the same level as Brandon Brooks. Brandon Brooks is the team's only true Pro Bowler at this point, only true All Pro. Zach Ertz maybe gets in, and maybe Cox gets in, and if Brandon Graham can get to 10 sacks, maybe they gift him one as like an alternate. But I got to tell you, man, I don't think Carson Wentz is playing like a Pro Bowl quarterback. No. I don't think any of the. I mean, I think Jordan Howard, had he started the season, maybe
those first 3 games, if he had been a starter,
right. I also think they beat Atlanta. They definitely beat Atlanta if he's playing a really large role. I'm interested to see how long the stinger. I've asked her. Yeah,
he wasn't even clear for contact as of Friday.
I've asked around. It seems like no one knows.
Yeah. Well, I think that's kind of going to be a see how the pain is as you go kind of thing.
I mean, stingers hurt. Like, they're called stingers for a reason.
That's what I'm saying. Like, so it'll be a pain tolerance thing is my guess.
I mean, they need him for those final 5 games.
Absolutely.
Because they can't...
Unless Jay Ajayi is his old self.
Right.
But there's what evidence do we have of that?
And see, that's my issue too, is I think it's kind of lazy to just bring in these guys. I think Jordan Matthews, based on the free agent market, you had to bring him in.
Receivers are bad.
And given his relationship with Carson Wentz, it makes sense. Jay Ajayi has never worked with any of these running backs before. If you think about it, Sproles and Clement are on IR.
Howard and Sanders are new. Yeah.
Howard and Sanders are new. Boston Scott got here after he was injured last year.
I mean, the dude hasn't practiced. He hasn't put on pads until today for over a year.
I mean, I just
his bad knees.
A lot of fans were giving me flack over that I was critical of that, but it's true. Like, D'Angelo Henderson was at least in a training camp. He's in football shape. The reason why you bring in Jordan Matthews is he was in a camp. Like, he's been around. Like, he's conditioned. So I'm interested to see what their plan is for Ajayi. I don't think the stinger is going to end Jordan Howard's season, but
we don't know if it's a multi-week thing or
right.
Whatever,
yeah, and I mean, if he's ready to go next week, which I highly doubt he is for a larger role, they need to be able to monitor him. And I think Boston Scott and Miles Sanders show you some stuff, but you've got to give them regular touches. It seemed like they got away from the running game and they were only down by 7 points,
and the passing game wasn't working. So.
Right, so. That's the thing, too. I know we're kind of rambling and kind of going off on tangents, but this was a weird game because you went into it thinking, well, you're lucky if you can keep it within a score. And they did keep it within a score, but not because of the reason you thought they'd keep it within a score, because you thought the offense might deliver and the defense might do something. You know what I mean? It's just a very interesting game. So, and I think you can take a lot of positives away from it. I also think you can take a lot of negatives away from it. It was an uneven game.
Do you think Carson Walsh lasts until the end of the season? At this point, if they have another week of the receivers doing this,
what purpose does it serve to fire a guy?
You can just have Mike Grove cover the receivers. That would be the first time a team's done something like that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Send a message or something.
Typically, you do that though, week 8. I mean,
but they're only getting worse since week.
Yeah, I mean, look, this wide receiver group is regressing at an incredible rate.
There's no way he's going to be here next year, so might as well just stop the bleeding a little bit.
I mean, I thought they should have fired him in week 7, but what are you going to do? I do think that there needs to be some changes.
Yes.
There needs to be some legitimate changes. Deuce Staley handles the running back rotation. I'm not saying fire him, but there needs to be a conversation of look, this dude's playing.
They also always say that Doug comes up with the plan beforehand and then he enacts it. Is kind of the messaging they had early. They keep changing.
That doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't. They keep you can adjust during a game.
Yeah.
I mean, so but that hasn't been as big of an issue before today, really, in a while, because Howard has been the de facto number 1 guy.
I think they need to figure out if anybody else can return punts. I like Boston Scott, but he's dealt with a couple of fumbles, and
he had a fumble today that he's lucky the kicker basically kicked it out of bounds.
Yeah, so I mean, there needs to be alterations here. I think he's a fine enough kick returner. We'll see what happens there, but I just it's such a weird game. It's the Bears game. You're kind of cool, they won, and you can take some positives, you can take a lot of negatives. That's how this game is.
And the negatives from that game were still bad today. They didn't improve on anything.
Right. I feel like this team is very uneven, and their performances are uneven, and think there's a lot of talent here. It's just an execution issue. Like, Carson hit Nelson Agholor where he was supposed to hit him. Anyone, you don't have to be Calvin Johnson to make that catch.
If you're a halfway decent receiver, you make that catch.
But that said, he missed 3 consecutive passes on his own.
He did.
So, like, you can't just bury all the blame on the wide receivers. Like,
that's why I blamed Carson earlier in the podcast.
Right. But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
like,
it's like give and take. Yeah.
There's a give and take, and I do think there are people that are way too sensitive about criticism for Carson, and I think there are people that are
too critical.
Yeah, they're fishing. And really,
somewhere in the middle.
It's somewhere in the middle. I think he's had a pretty good. He's played pretty well. This is the second worst performance he's had this season, next to the Cowboys game. In the Cowboys game, he was pressing for most of it because they couldn't score. But outside of these 2 games, I mean, 2 bad games out of 10 isn't really a terrible season or a bad quarterback or a scapegoat or anything like that. You know, it's not like he's out there Blake Bortlesing around.
Yeah.
So we're going to have a follow-up podcast, you know, on Tuesday, I think. Zachariah is going to be very busy this week. You want to tell them about?
Nah, it's fine. But yeah, we'll get another podcast for you guys on Tuesday. Yeah, leave us some questions, write us some reviews. We'll read all them on the Tuesday pod. I think this is a good spot. Any last thoughts before we go?
Yeah, what did you want to talk about with Zach Brown?
Oh, yeah. So the other day, I think Saturday, the Philadelphia Inquirer had a story about how, like, Jim Schwartz has, like, a little more personnel control. Not control, but influence is probably the right word, than most defensive coordinators probably do. And, like, we don't need to talk about this too much, but, like, 2 of the things that, like, stood out that you and I have been texting about were that he basically picked Zack Brown over Jamie Collins. Again, that's not like, it didn't say in that, that's not like guaranteed Jamie Collins would have come here.
Yeah, he was coming off 2 terrible years.
Yeah, and he signed for a cheap deal with the Patriots. He's going to be an all-pro this year. He's been great. And then the other one, which is more egregious probably, is that Chris Long was like interested in coming back. Jim Schwartz was like, you're not going to have the same role as last year. He said, all right, I'll go retire. Malik Jackson gets hurt in week 1 out for the year. The Eagles hit up Chris Long. He starts getting in shape for over a course of like 2 weeks to come back. And then Jim Schwartz again comes in and is like, nah, same thing. So they basically strung Chris Long along. They really could have used Chris Long, I think, in that like first like 6 to 8 game stretch.
Sure.
Now they probably don't need him as much because Jannard Avery, it seems like, can bring some of that pass rush. But I don't know. What did you take away from all that stuff? I mean, Jim Schwartz is a unique defensive coordinator in the way he was brought here to kind of help Doug become a head coach and all that. Like, it's unique.
There are people that have like kind of scoffed at this, but Jim Schwartz carried Doug Peterson that first year. I thought he was largely influential in them even having a shot at a 500 record that year. I think Jim Schwartz is a good head. I can't say he's a good head coach, but I think he's a good. He thinks like a head coach, and I think that's helped this team a lot. He's the head coach of the defense, right? Doug Peterson doesn't step in his lane. He doesn't step in his. He's been invaluable, I think, to Doug Peterson. Have there been performances where Doug Peterson has carried him? Sure, the Super Bowl. I mean, for sure. But, like, I also think Jim Schwartz brings a unique perspective because he has been a head coach. He's been a coach significantly longer than Doug Peterson has. And I think he brings an idea of, hey, he knows his defense best. I have no problem with a coordinator weighing in on personnel decisions. They shouldn't be the be-all, end-all, though. And I think that's kind of concerning. And when somebody is a coordinator and they have personnel say, or they have influence on personnel, they should get even more blame if they fail. Because those are the guys that are supposed to know fits. You know, general managers all the time draft guys that can be square pegs in round holes. And that's a problem. But they're also not the guys coaching them. And so when you can pick your personnel and you're coaching them, you should assume a lot of the blame for when those failures happen.
Yeah. And I think Jim Schwartz deserves a lot of credit for, especially these last 2 years. Like I said, they just haven't scored that much. Mm-hmm. So you kind of wonder where they would be if they had a less capable defensive coordinator. I don't know if he's going to get another head coaching job.
I don't think he will.
But he's a good coach. Maybe he shouldn't be as involved in the personnel thing, but he also knows what he wants in his defense. So kind of get it in that sense.
Yeah. I think that's a good, we know where we are in that sense too as well.
All right, we'll end on that note. Thank you guys for listening, and if you don't already, subscribe and leave us some comments. Thanks.